Building the Future, Green Building in the New Millennium, brought to you by Sustainable Homes of the Future.
Yeah.
Our natural world is in crisis. Buildings emit 40% of carbon globally. We need solutions now. Join the conversation today. Welcome, everyone, to Building the Future, Green Building in the New Millennium, the podcast where we explore everything sustainability related in the built environment and also the human environment and the technological environment and beyond. We'll see where we go today. I'm very excited today to have Brett Little. Bring up his picture there. There we go. For any of you watching. Brett, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, glad to.
Brett is the program manager for the education and certifications arm of the GreenHome Institute, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They are a not-for-profit that does fantastic work getting the word out, really, and doing webinars. I've been on probably a dozen at this point of Brett's webinars, and he's a great moderator and knows a ton about not only the building industry and building science itself, but specifically green building, sustainability related innovations, different options when it comes to electrification, which I'm sure we'll talk about today at some point. So a wealth of knowledge. Thank you, Brett, for joining me. And I guess my first question is, you've before you were the program manager for the education arm, you were the executive director for the entire program. And it looked from your resume like basically you were doing a little bit of everything, probably still are. But my first question is, do you, Brett Little, have a sort of working definition of sustainability? How do you approach it? Is it different project by project, or do you sort of go in with a particular mindset and then figure out where on the spectrum you're going to land based on clients, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It kind of all formed for me back when I went to college to get my bachelor's of science in sustainable business. Nice. The entire time, 11 years ago, we're just talking about sustainability when it comes to business and having ideas and kind of definitions thrown at us. So it really got crafted in me during that time. Prior to that time, I was sort of just a lost environmentalist. Like, how do I apply this to do anything good, right? Other than just get upset all the time. And no offense, environmentalists do a lot of good work, but I just didn't know where I fit. So I went to Aquinas College and started getting this. And we really talked about a lot about the triple bottom line. I mean, that was sort of where our definitions lied for sustainability. So just that maximizing, financial returns or profit, while also improving benefits to the environment and to society. So that's kind of been underlying goal of sustainability for me. And then I really get excited about the International Living Future Institute and, what their definition is. And, they really talk about culturally rich, ecologically restorative, and socially just. So it's really kind of taking it to another level. And I've always really lately been inspired by that. And then, obviously on a project by project basis, you kind of take that high level of inspiration, right? And you sort of bring it down to the, where you need to be on a project and use it to help move that project forward. But every project, of course, has its limitations on how far the clients want to go or what the budgets are.
Because you guys are, GreenHome Institute, I assume that most of the folks that are coming to you are on some level interested in sustainability and sustainable applications of, building science and innovations and things like that. Give us maybe an example of a project where sustainability is like way at the end on the project goals and some things that you might implement in that case. And then, high level, somebody comes in and has this, really cool project that they want to work on, and they've already basically done the research, and how does that differ on the spectrum, project by project?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, typically, and again, depends on where the project is and what its requirements are. So, some of the affordable housing projects we work with are pursuing tax credits. So, they have to achieve a certain outcome or level. Whether they're excited about it or not is one thing.
Yeah.
And then, on the flip side, we get clients that come to us with really big goals and big dreams of achieving certain levels of sustainability. So sometimes, the ones that are kind of on one end of the spectrum, it's really just a matter of, it's just trying to figure out, okay, where are they currently at with their plans? Where do they measure up at? And especially focused on energy efficiency and operations, especially, if they're involved in paying electric and gas and water bills. What are some of the simple ways we can find products that we know work and they're tested that are going to move the needle on their energy goals or energy ratings and their water efficiency usage? And then also try to walk away from that with just, getting them to really bump up on health and ventilation, and ensure that their occupants have, proper ventilation coming to their units or to their house, and, just making sure that that fits in with their needs, and advocating that, hey, maybe putting in a better working bath fan that's on a timer that hits a certain level of ventilation pole, really is pretty easy to do, and it's going to help out your occupants, hit that health level. So that's kind of where we're having those conversations, just really trying to figure out where they're currently at, and then just get them to move to that next level. The other types of clients who come in the other direction, it's almost like trying to get them to focus on really what it is they want to achieve. Is it, a healthier home? Like, is that really where you want to be, or is it net zero?
So you're trying to find their why in a way.
Yeah. Like, why are you doing? Because there's so many things we can do, and we can look around and try to do all this stuff, and it can become overwhelming. So, just where is it that you really feel your focus is, and can we hone in on that and go after that area?
And I imagine with that second group of folks, that it's almost, sometimes people don't realize that maybe one specific project goal and another specific project goal, while both could fall under the category or the umbrella of sustainability, might actually be in opposition to one another. And the goal, as far as I understand in my work, is integrating all of those things and trying to find those points where you can get some redundancies and maybe eliminate variables, eliminate redundancies. Is that some of that focus that you're talking about, is like, well, actually you can't have, it'd be really nice if all your pipes were copper, but then you couldn't lean against it. So,
well, that's
practical,
Yeah, absolutely. That, and then the idea of goals outside of green building, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's just be honest. The larger a home is, right, the more difficult it is to achieve these results. Part of it's just science. You've got to keep more heat in a home to reduce energy, and the more space you have to heat, the harder it is. So you have sort of these goals of having this. People don't have a goal of ever having a large home. It's just utility. How can I get, comfort? Can I get usefulness out of it? So is there a way to have a conversation where you have these big energy efficiency goals, but you also have this home that's using a lot of space in an area that maybe isn't as helpful? So working with designers to figure out, how do we get smaller spaces with more utility out of them? So those are other things that we're excited about in our conversations.
How easy or hard is that, when somebody isn't really thinking about square footage, and then you put that magnifying glass over the design and say, we could achieve your energy efficiency goal if we cut your house in,
and again,
it off.
Right. And part of it's, for us, we're not architects, we're not designers, we're not designing homes. So we kind of stay out of that, other than to just say, look, your house is going to use all this energy, and it makes your goals very difficult, other than caking on a bunch of extra solar panels, which are really expensive.
Right.
But, maybe, is there a strategic way we can figure out how to get more usefulness out of your home? And here are some folks you can work with. And I'll be honest, it is a difficult conversation, and it doesn't, most of the time it does not. They would tend to just throw more efficiency at it than shrink space down. But as budgets get tighter and there's a recession, those conversations, I think people are more willing to have them. So
yeah, maybe they don't need the 1,000-square-foot mudroom anymore.
Right, right, or maybe it can be rearranged a little bit. So
yeah. Exactly, yeah, smart design. So speaking of smart design, integrated design here, how often are you involved from like day one on a project, and how often do you come in at the end where basically all the decisions are already made and you're just like the one trying to like find some way to check another box off?
Yeah, it's really more the latter. It's just sort of like squeeze in the green person at the end and try to sort of fit all the puzzle pieces together. Other times we will get invited at the beginning before anyone even knows what it's going to look like. And it's like, well, we can't tell you, we can't give you any advice because we have no idea what your house is going to look like. So it's a sweet spot where you want to get right into the early design stage where you see some sort of, basic elevations or whatever, just a basic site floor plan that can be easily changed and switched around without too much effort or anyone getting too offended that they spent a lot of time. Now on existing homes, obviously that is a perfect time because you get in and you evaluate what's going on, and especially if someone's living there, you get that idea of what's been happening. So obviously, the best time in an existing home is always yesterday, right? Always get in as early as possible before you start thinking too ahead. But in a new home, it's really kind of that middle ground between having some kind of idea with the ability to still manipulate it, even change housing size ideally. So
that's cool. Yeah, that's neat. Actually, I had thought about the coming on the back end, maybe a little too late to really be involved, but I had never thought about being so far on the early side that there's not really much for you to do other than just sort of advise, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if I was an architect, I'd be like, sure, let me design, but we just stay out of that. So
yeah. Do you find that one of the factors or one of the reasons that you're coming in later in projects is lack of awareness? That people just aren't aware that that's a feature that sort of needs to come in earlier? Or are you finding that it's a cost thing because if they bring you in earlier, then they have to pay you for the additional time?
There's, those are two, I mean, those are big ones. The other one could be that they heard about some kind of financial resource or something, right? And so needed to have a sustainability component when they heard about the financial resource. The other one is they might just assume that the building code is as good as it gets and didn't even realize that there's a huge gap between where we want projects to be and where building code is and all the gray area in between. And so when they realize, someone could help me manage that gap, whereas, I thought originally the construction team or the designs team was building it and designing it as good as it possibly could be. So those are all ways that we might get pulled in.
Mm-hmm. And you guys do mostly residential? Do you do and like multifamily and single family, or do you do commercial as well?
Yeah, I mean, mixed use we get involved in, but that's where primarily most of the building is, living space. Other than that, no, we typically stay away from commercial. It's just not our wheelhouse and defer to others. So
makes sense. And a lot of interestingly enough, and a lot of the commercial developers at this point have in-house systems for a lot of that stuff and in-house folks, because I think investors have seen on the commercial side of the value of doing the value engineering earlier on in the process and not having so much, back and forth once the design's done.
Yeah, I mean, I still would argue there's still a lot of room for improvement on commercial as well, but there's definitely still there's more knowledge about it and in-house knowledge for sure. Even they're larger firms too, right? So residential firms typically tend to be a lot smaller. So
right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Those are my off the off the cuff questions here,
Sure.
but I did send you some earlier. Okay, yeah. So when you were in school, it was 11 years ago, and you were studying sustainable business. You talked about triple bottom line, and that's kind of where you guys are right now, and I love that because that's where it's at. People, profit, planet. That's USGBC's definition of sustainability. What were the conversations like about sustainable business 11 years ago, and how have you seen that conversation change as somebody that that was studying it more on the business side and less on the housing side initially, the building side?
The conversations, thankfully I'm a sort of optimistic, idealistic, right? I mean, that's who I am. And so a lot of these conversations were kind of out there, really high level, really futuristic goals, unless you lived in maybe California or Portland or Europe. Mm-hmm. It was tough to have these conversations in West Michigan because we would go to class, do all this stuff, and then leave and then go into the real world or go to an internship, and people, nowhere near what we were talking about. Yeah. And we're still pretty far off, but I mean, the idea of, we just studied cradle to cradle a lot. Mm-hmm. So the idea of everything being fully recyclable or biodegradable or reusable, being taken back, every single product, that was the dream, right? And everything made from 100% sustainable energy. So not just renewable energy, but energy that, was made in a way that was non-toxic, and, even the energy systems themselves were 100% recyclable. And then we talked a lot about biomimicry and this idea that we can mimic nature in many different ways. So those were a lot of our conversations. And it was trying to figure out how to take that and bring it into the, at least where I work, the West Michigan business community, or Michigan, or even the Midwest, where a lot of our, projects we referenced were. And how do you get people to just sort of move towards those goals and have those conversations? And even our teachers, they were just way out there too with their ideas. So as, you had to really be able to bridge two worlds and realize I'm here right now, and that's okay. And I might be frustrated, but I want to get here, and, it's going to be a while, and we're going to try hard. So,
yeah. Is proving, cost savings, the nexus of all of this, really?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the crux of everything, is how do we use this conversation to say this is going to save, money, or, get quicker return on investments, or make a competitive advantage, that one of those three ways of approaching it.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I've heard, resoundingly, definitely from everybody in the space, is like, you almost have to be a cost analysis guru and then a sustainability ninja. Right. You have to go in with the cost savings bit. And then once you've gotten some buy-in, then that's where you can sort of like move the pieces around behind the scenes and say, actually, guess what? I could even get you a little further down the line with X, Y, Z, and come up with the smart design implementation.
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
You talked a little bit about renewable energy versus sustainable energy just now, and I'm wondering if you could go a little bit deeper into that, because I think that's one area that, as solar comes out and continues to roll out on a large level, and then you hear people talk about community solar and smart grids and things like that. I don't know that there are very many experts in that space. And I think that the general public probably just sees renewable as renewable and doesn't understand that difference between sustainable and renewable. Can you go into a little bit of detail on that?
I think the big one is looking at a dam and thinking, oh, here's renewable energy, right? It gets counted as it is renewable energy. Or looking at bio-based energy, right? Like growing plants or cutting trees down. Those two are very questionable, because on the bio-based side, you're hacking down trees, destroying land, potentially, depending on how it's managed.
Sure.
And then on the water side, if you've got massive dams, you're kind of creating, ecological destruction further on down, right? Mm-hmm. So our argument would be that those types of systems are really not, they're better than, natural gas and coal, but they're not sustainable. And we need to scale down dams to small stream water and bio to a more managed area that's, reusable. Now, on the solar and wind side, of course, I know you're looking at, take back systems for panels, right? So what happens to the panels at the end of their life? How can they be recycled, reused, not put into a landfill and cause, potential toxic issues?
Right.
And especially while they're being manufactured too. And the same goes for wind turbines. Can all the parts be recycled? So those ones are a little bit easier to go after that. Or, how do we replicate, solar like the way the trees do, right? Trees, they all use solar energy, and they're 100% locally made and biodegradable, right? I mean, why can't we do that? So those would be like, again, setting that ideal goal to the future, like how do we get energy that way and store it that way and use it that way? And again, what we're working on now is great, and we want to head towards more wind, solar, just trying to think of, okay, as we get more done, what are the materials actually being made of? So.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So it's really taking that whole life cycle and I mean, even to what you're saying about dams. I mean, I imagine that the damage that a dam makes, you probably don't see until a couple 100 years down the road. I mean, maybe you do see some of that initially.
Right. Or you get a big flood like we had here in Michigan,
right.
and it causes significant damage. And, everyone points fingers, but it's like, well, maybe the finger should be pointed at why is there a dam here in the first place? Maybe that wasn't a good idea. So at this scale anyway. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Interesting theme that's come up, and you just sort of referenced that a little bit as I've been talking to folks, is the idea that these technological innovations or just innovations in green building and in sustainable building, we want to think of them as new technologies, but really what we're doing is we're applying new technologies or maybe, information technologies and technological advances. But really what we're doing is we're taking, as like biomimicry, we're taking systems that exist within nature and then trying to some degree replicate those or enhance those using the technology that we have. And really, so it's funny because you think of innovation as like a path forward, and this certainly is, but really what we're doing in order to achieve that path forward is to go back and look at, as you said, like how do trees use sunlight, and how can we I talked to are you familiar with Sean Armstrong, Redwood Energy? He's a big electrification guy, and he was on the podcast, and he was talking about how his neighbor is a peach farmer and has developed this system of using the water from this creek that's running through his property, but only using it in an underground way, not pulling the water out to water anything, but using the water and basically using the system that exists there and trying to tap into that existing system. I mean, what are some advances, some innovations, some ideas, some technologies that that are sort of next level right now? And can you maybe like give a couple examples of ones that are like pure technological innovation, and then ones where it's more about sort of going back to basics, or are all of them a hybrid?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's start with water, right? You just said water use, right? So water
big thing out here in California for sure.
Right. Yeah. So, water falls from the sky every day, and people have collected it for thousands of years. Right. And so, right now what happens is water falls from the sky, and it becomes a problem. It becomes something that a word we invented, stormwater, right? A term that we invented as a problem. And so all over we have this big problem, whether it's a flood or not, it's just an issue that has to be dealt with. That's expensive. The second problem we have is that, if we're in cities, water bills are going up significantly. They don't stop because of all the infrastructure. If we're out in more rural areas, like where I'm at, believe it or not, I'm adjacent to Lake Michigan, not very far. Freshwater body. Where I live, I'm running out of water, and I'm on a well, and I'm running out of water. And certain parts of the areas where I live is running out of water faster than others. And it's people like, how can you be running out? Even people in Michigan who live here, like, we can't be running out of water. I see a lake over there. But it's just the way things were designed with glacial ice melts and all that. So I think rainwater is an old solution with new tech to keep it safe and keep it healthy that we can use to solve a stormwater problem and a water cost or water shortage problem. And so we can significantly reduce, our demand on expensive water systems. Plus, it's one of the cleanest, healthiest, depending on what medium it hits next, right? But typically still one of the cleanest or easiest to clean sources of water than anywhere else. So we've been an advocate in trying to just get the word out about, rainwater systems as one technology. So
that's cool. And if you want to plug your webinar, was like 2 weeks ago, I think you had the rainwater.
We actually had two back to back. It was not planned out at all, but we had two rainwater catchments. I would say one was more like sort of old home urban rainwater catchment. The other one was just more general, like they referenced a lot more rural projects, if you will.
Cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great, go to GreenHome Institute's website and check out. There's tons of webinars that Brett's been doing for the last
7 years maybe now. Yeah, I think so. It's been a long time. So
that's awesome, man. I was impressed when I went on and saw the pure volume that was on there of everything you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you. And then another technology, and now that I know we have a camera here, I can show you. Oh, nice. I can show you some bad news. I'm sitting in radon right now. I don't know. Can you see that?
Oh boy.
Is that?
Radon 3.3 is what it says.
Yeah, and that's upstairs. So I'm downstairs. So it's even worse down here. So the technology here is monitoring, right, of our air quality. That's going to be the future. I think we're all going to be. We have smoke alarms, we have fire alarms, we have carbon monoxide detectors, we have moisture, humidity detectors in our house and our thermostats. But we want to know what the CO2 is in our house. We want to know what the radon is in my house. We want to know what the VOC particulates are off-gassing formaldehydes. And we want to know what's happening on a constant level so we can, put systems and plans in place to get it out of there and have alarms, if an issue does happen, especially people who have chemical sensitivities or asthma or other triggers. Yeah. So the future will be every home will have these devices that are detecting all these data points. And I think having that level of awareness, I'm thankful to Airwaves Things Plus for, sending me this. I've been testing it out for a month now. Cool. And I get, I can quickly check on my app, all the, data, over the course of, you can see like over the course of a month, I can get my CO2 readings here.
And it gives you the day-by-day readout down there.
Yep. And I can get a printout to my computer or get it on my computer, and I can get much better, easier to look at aggregate data.
Cool.
And then just get a sense for, what's going on in my house. And especially for me, I'm planning a project improvement here. So now it's actually sort of changed my mind on what I think I might buy to improve my house. But these things are important. I mean, CO2 itself seems, CO2, who cares? It's not going to hurt me. It's just warming the climate, But the reality is CO2 building up in our homes, especially now, because we're all working here.
Right.
We're all working from home. It makes us tired. It makes us groggy. It's harder to concentrate. There's evidence to show that, people lose productivity under high levels of CO2. So it also harms commercial buildings and businesses. Yep. And the worst is if you're having a party and there's too much CO2, everyone wants to go home because they're tired. So, but if you look at COVID-19, while it's very difficult to track, obviously they're working on it in a building, like is it in the air, like influenza. We do know that if there are high levels of CO2 in a building and it's in a hotspot area with an outbreak, we could also then assume that is also in tandem with high levels of COVID floating in the air in a building. So, or influenza. So it's very well connected. You can use that as to make an inference. So I think it's very important to start monitoring our air quality and make informed decisions with it.
That's great. And I learned something. You had Nate Adams on, who's part of the Electrify Everything movement. And then also has a company, Badass HVAC.
Yeah.
Oh shoot, I might have to bleep that out because we're not an explicit podcast here. But I learned that you had dew point you had humidity and dew point or something like that on your airwaves thing.
Actually, this one's, I was disappointed. I love everything they're doing, and they just did not have dew point.
Oh,
so I went and grabbed another little sensor, and this one's actually down in this room with me. You see that, and it is actually tracking dew point.
Wow. Okay.
But I was worried about my basement, which typically basements have higher humidity. So
yeah, and that was cool for me to learn. Just that every single one of these variables, whether it's VOCs or CO2s, they're all interconnected. They have to do with dew point, they have to do with humidity, they have to do with water vapor, all of these different systems that are going on in the house, all the thermodynamics that are going on in the house, and they're all interrelated, and there are, I know, a lot of new not necessarily technologies, I guess, but talking about sort of going back to old school stuff, and then just improving upon it. This idea of vapor permeability in a home is one that's somewhat of a hot topic. For so long you put the vapor seal on the house. That's just what you do, right? But now we're learning that there are ways to not vapor seal a house and maybe actually benefit from a healthier indoor atmosphere, ability for maybe less mold, less humidity in the walls, things like that. I know all that stuff is climate specific. I know all that stuff is, really specific to the project, but in that particular area, when it comes to, vapor permeability or maybe new materials and things like that, what is there anything exciting for you in that space, or things that you've learned over the course of your career that you're advising people to do in projects these days that were different?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it actually ties in very well because, I know, one of the questions is, what is some of the trends, right? What's a hot topic? And really sort of this embodied, or what we call upfront energy or embodied carbon, right? This trend to, I've been watching it rapidly move quickly to remove carbon from our building materials. Well, what does that have to do with moisture going through the wall? Well, interestingly enough, a lot of the carbon intense insulations also are, impermeable in many ways. And so they're trying to keep that moisture out, which we all thought was the best thing to do. But that causes all sorts of problems, like it gets stuck in the wall. It can cause humidity issues. And those ones also have higher VOC off-gassing. So you've got higher materials that cause potential moisture issues, they have higher carbon output. They cost more money, not all the time, but some of the time. And then they, and then they have a potential health drawback. So our thought is that if you design a building right, you should be able to have more natural permeable insulations that can allow moisture to pass through the walls, unencumbered, without causing an issue in the house. And this gets back to your earlier question about trade-offs. But obviously unfortunately, the one trade-off is a lot of those have lower R values. So they resist heat a little bit less. And so that's where you would have to find other ways to be more energy efficient. I mean, they're not huge trade-offs, but that's what we do with green building. We try to maximize all the 5 pillars of green, right? Health, energy, water, materials, and place. And so, energy you might use a little bit more energy, at least in that spot, but you're gonna have a healthier, more durable home that's, not trapping water and moisture. So.
Yeah. And still, you're probably gonna have to make some changes at some point. I don't think people really think about retrofitting when they're building a new home.
Right.
And that's one of the things I've learned from, your conversations, among others, is how important it is, especially on a commercial level. If we're talking about commercial buildings for a second, where your systems are so much bigger and you're, delivering air and water and whatever it may be on site, like to more people working harder. you know, you're going to build a building that hopefully will be around for 50 plus years, and whatever systems you're putting in that building are not going to be around for 50 years. So that's something that's worth talking about up front.
Right.
You know, okay, well, when should I expect to, you know, redo the HVAC system, or when should
Right.
I expect that maybe I should take another look at my insulation and see if there are some better options out there? Are those conversations that you're having with folks on the front end?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, people want to have more durability and longevity, um, and so you do want to have systems that last a lot longer, aren't going to rot or mold or cause other problems. And then, yeah, on the HVAC system side, I mean, that's a big one. You don't want to lock into an outdated. I mean, really, that's where fuel is, right? You don't want. We want to encourage people not to lock into the outdated fuels,
Mm-hmm.
which we believe will be, you know, obviously fuel oil. That's clear, but you know, we don't deal with a lot of fuel oil projects, so you know, more like natural gas, right? You know, if you lock into a newer system, you're going to be stuck with that decision for a lot of years. And as far as I can tell, you know, running electricity through our homes, you know, maybe someday we'll get away from that, and I don't know what we'll use, but
Yeah.
I don't foresee that going away for a very long time. And so trying to encourage people to think ahead and be like, okay, you know, how can you plan for this? Okay, if you're going to do natural gas now, how can you plan for an electrical change in the future? One thing I appreciate about like the Enterprise Green Communities program is that they sort of built in this sort of you know, design for future electrification.
Oh, wow.
So they admitted that it's like, okay, you might not do it now. I understand, depending on where you're at, but we're going to tee you up so that it's just a quick swap out. But if we can take you further, we can try to encourage you to, you know, not put that system in, you know, really in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So are you, you know, Electrify Everything? I think Nate's in Cleveland, so he's
Mm.
in kind of not too far from you.
Yep.
I know it's a huge thing out here in California, you know,
Right.
and Berkeley and 31 other municipalities have
Right.
all
Yeah.
at this point committed to no new construction with natural gas,
Right. Right.
which
Right.
is a game changer, you know, in a lot of ways for a lot of people. But do you see a similar movement happening
Mm.
over there in the Midwest, or is it a little harder buy-in just because there's less sun? I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking through how that would be a different conversation over there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's kind of two reasons that it's difficult. The first is just tradition, right? HVAC contractors and everybody. I mean, we all like our tradition. We do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And out here, the tradition has been, you know, over the last several years to just put in, you know, standard natural gas furnaces and just keep turning them over. So it's really hard to take people away from that tradition. And then you add in fear, the fear that it gets too cold here and that the system, you know, won't work. And then the people responsible for installing it are going to get the angry call, you know, in the dead of February when it's negative 13 out, that, hey, I'm freezing in my house.
Right.
So between tradition and fear, it's very difficult to get the heating and cooling contractors shifted away from this mindset.
Hmm.
And, you know, we want people to be trustful and you know, be trusting. So obviously developers and project teams hire an HVAC and they trust their word, right? It's like, yeah, he said it's going to be a bad idea, so I trust what he's saying.
Right.
So we try to come in and have a conversation. The first part we start with a conversation is just, you know, just sizing, right? Like HVAC systems are notoriously oversized and then perform terribly. So the first question we ask is like, do you want an oversized system that you might be paying more for and having all these issues with? And the HVAC's probably oversizing it, not because they're an awful person, but because they're just moving, they're in a hurry and they're doing the same thing, right? So ask them why they're doing that. Ask them for the sizing. And then, you know, the next conversation is, well, have you got educated on new technology and how these heat pumps work when it's freezing out? And have you talked to people who live in Minneapolis and they're in homes with this stuff, and it's, you know, it's Minnesota. There's probably snow on the ground there right now. As we speak, there's probably a foot of snow, right? You know, so
August,
it's freezing
that's
there.
when they start these days.
Yeah. So, you know, does it work? You know, have these conversations. And so we really challenge people on this. And if there's enough time to really take on that challenge, they might be interested. But yeah, those are the two big barriers. And then obviously some of these systems still come in at a little higher cost because they're not being fairly compared, right? I mean, if you're talking about a modulating system that really works at the level it needs to be and not overworks, and, you know, you're talking heating and cooling, because if you're not comparing heating and cooling to just the heating system, then you'll never win on price. It won't win. But the second we start comparing these things to modulating furnaces and high efficiency sea or air conditioning as the alternative, most of the time it's a wash financially. And now we're starting to see where fuel switching in the Midwest and in Michigan used to be, you know, a dirty word or, you know, frowned upon from the utilities in the state. They're now actively, in some ways, incentivizing fuel switching. So it's helping our lives become easier. So, yeah.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah. I mean, if they're doing it out there with those temperatures and all that, yeah, then, I mean, clearly a lot of these next level things are easier to do in our climate out here, which is a more moderate climate.
Right.
You know, but so when you hear that, you know, the South is doing a lot of electrification and, you know, the utility companies up there are even pushing for it, that's definitely good news.
Yeah.
No question on that.
Yeah.
I want to change, we got about 15 minutes left. So I want to change a little bit here. So you do a lot of stuff. You mentioned the Enterprise for Communities Green Building Certification. I've attended some webinars that you've done on the different building certifications. We have LEED, we have Living Building Challenge. We've got Green Globes, we've got Energy Star, we've got DOE Net Zero Ready.
Yeah.
We've got tons of these, and now we have WELL and FitWell, which are fun new programs that really do focus on just people, honestly. And you know, if you had to give your top 3 certification programs, and I understand that probably those will be linked to a specific either building type or approach. You know, what are some highlights of where the building certification industry is headed right now?
I mean, I think there is a huge interest in passive house. I mean, it's energy efficiency, so it has a quick, you know, cost savings return. There's a lot of people who like the science of it and the challenge of it, the sort of high level sort of pass fail approach to it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do see a huge growth, in passive house certification, or just what we would call sort of almost passive house. So just this sort of, what I always like to say is, like, you know, aim for passive house, right? Like, put it out there, put it in your project plan and your goal, and just try your hardest. Because if you don't aim the highest, then you'll never even get very far right if you just shoot very low. So aim for it, and then shoot, you know, you'll get to the end of the project and maybe a blower door number came back by 1.001 off, right? Or a Windows spec came in wrong by 1 U value point. I mean, and then you're out, right? You're out of the game. But don't think of it as a failure. Think of it as like, well, what if you had just targeted, like, you know, an energy rating of 50% better or something? You would have failed that one probably and fell at 25%. So, you know, you always just want to put it out there and try your best to hit it, and then learn from why you didn't get there. And so passive house is helpful. The US version I'm grateful for because it incorporates the DOE's Indoor Air Plus program, Zero Energy Ready program. And so it builds in air quality and being ready for net zero. And then, you know, second to that, all the different programs, whether it be passive house or LEED, living building, or even our internal GreenStar program, they all have what we call zero energy components to them. So that's obviously a really big trend, is trying to get to zero energy. And zero energy is sort of a Wild West term right now, where anybody gets to say it, and there's no ramifications or recourse if you're, if you're wrong about it, or you can't really be wrong, right? And so there's a lot of zero washing going on, and so, these certification programs come up with these sort of additional ways to achieve zero and calculate it. That's, in my way, a more legitimate way to do it. And they all have different approaches, but at the end of the day, they're all high-level approaches that really require a lot of work. So zero energy, obviously, very catchy term. It's just which program are you going to use to try to define it? But pick one of the programs and try to get there.
And zero energy, to be clear, we were talking about embodied carbon earlier, and this is zero energy is focused on operational.
Yeah. So obviously the embodied carbon piece is getting more interest, more excitement, especially from, living building. But yeah, we're purely talking about, the generation of renewable energy and reduction of energy use, over the course of a full year.
Yeah. Yep. Which matters in a big way in the reuse and renovation category, because, then you're double dipping. Then you're, if you can use a building that already exists and you're not building new, then you're already reducing your embodied carbon up front, and then you're reducing your operational carbon through retrofits or adding new systems or re-insulating or, weatherization in general.
Yeah. I mean, we got a lot of, millions of existing homes that need a lot of help, multifamily, single family, you name it, townhomes. And they all can be moved down these continuums, to zero carbon. And from an operational standpoint, it might be a little more difficult than a new home, but yeah, you get to kind of have the benefit of not having to put a lot of new materials in to achieve that. So, yeah.
Have you had success with any projects that were like multifamily retrofit, where you were really able to go in and for, not all that much cost really have a big impact?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a retrofit. I mean, we've had some success with a project, where we were switching them over from, gas furnaces to heat pumps. As just, I count that as a major success. So some basic stuff, right? Some brand new windows, a little bit of air sealing, a little bit of Energy Star appliances, nothing too, out of the ordinary. And, being able to put in the heat pumps, have it be cost effective and be cost affordable in our climate. We would say that's success without anything to you could walk into the apartment and it looked like any normal apartment. It didn't look like some kind of crazy green thing had occurred to it. So.
And if they were at a point where they were going to have to put some money into, putting some new systems or swapping out, furnaces or whatever. Anyway, that's my dog flipping out outside there.
You got my cat here.
Yeah. What's your cat's name?
Well, it's Dinah. Yeah. I don't know how loud that was, but yeah.
I heard her earlier one time.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if they're, at a point where they know they're going to have to be putting some capital into the building anyway, then it's the perfect time to do a little bit of an energy assessment and, or sustainability assessment, if you will, and figure out some ways that those dollars could probably go to a healthier and longer lasting, and certainly more efficient system.
Yeah. And I mean, there are homes all over where, heating and cooling systems, other systems are going down and need to be repaired. And I think, just having a good plan forward to maximize the sustainability of them, those are things we're trying to get the word out. You can go and call up your local, remodeler, or go to the hardware store and you're going to find some basic stuff. But, if you look a little bit harder, dig a little bit deeper, there are some other great alternatives out there that are going to work. And there's, mortgage rates are down right now. There's green mortgages coming out from Freddie Mac called Green Choice. So between those two different things and increasing utility rebates, it becomes easier and easier to flip homes to higher levels of sustainability. I'm planning to do that with my own home, try to hit zero carbon here maybe in the next month or two, and use it as a case study. I mean, not have to do anything that's weird that nobody else couldn't do, and, you know, hopefully it could be mimicked. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into, you know, one of my last questions, which is really, you know, now you're on the education side to a big degree. And obviously I'm assuming most of the people that are attending webinars and are people that have an existing interest, you know, are already in the business, trying to keep their finger on the pulse and, you know, learn more and be able to deliver better product or better experience for clients, or a better building, you know, whatever it may be. What do we have to do to get legislators and you know, community advocates and you know, city council folks, and, you know, what do we have to do to get them educated and get them on board? I mean, I guess I'm answering my own question a little bit and assuming that the answer is education or awareness, but do you agree with that? You know, what can we be doing as advocates or as people listening to the podcast? Like, can the average individual do anything to further this process, in your opinion?
Well, I think, you know, tying it into how it can be an add-on and benefit to other problems. So, you know, I hate to say it, but this year, you know, two big problems have come up. All right. And they're kind of on the front of everybody's mind. And that's, you know, COVID-19. So health. How do we be more healthy, right? How can we be healthier in our spaces? Now everybody wants to know. And so it's elevated the conversation to things that we could have only hoped that people cared about before.
Yeah.
And racial justice, which turns into environmental justice, right? Yeah. And so between those two things, how does the building science movement, you know, help in those areas? You know, and there are huge ties in there. And so obviously that's on their mind right now, policymakers and advocacy folks. So I think, you know, kind of going in and saying, look, you know, helping people who don't have access to, you know, healthier housing, you know, lower utility bills, you know, from a justice standpoint, why don't they have that access? Well, how do we help them get that access? How do we, you know, get the word out about that and move the needle, and then also reduce carbon emissions and make people healthier? And then also, again, people just on the market side going out and trying to say, how do I make my house healthier in case, you know, I either, you know, there's probably no way to stop it once it enters your home, but at least how do I make myself healthier to protect myself against it, or this commercial building that I'm walking into? So, we have an answer for that. It's basic ventilation standards, right? We know this already. So it's like saying, hey, we've been talking about all these things. We want everyone to have affordable utility bills. We want everyone to have a healthier home and building. And so now I think policymakers, the building science community, can jump up and say, hey, look, we're not going to be able to solve these problems, but some of the solutions we've been prescribing create jobs, they create local jobs, and boom, they help with your energy efficiency goals that your city probably has, and they help with some of your justice goals as well, I would argue.
Yeah. So let's figure out a way to, you know, attack all of these at once, and we sort of have some solutions.
Yeah.
So why not listen? That's great. Last question. You want to give a shout out to anyone that has been, I guess, a mentor or you know, anybody that's sort of inspired you in the field along the way? I'd be curious if you have an anecdotal story or something about that. But you know, clearly this is a movement that's still small, and we're trying to grow it. And so, you know, there are a lot of folks in the space that are really have had to have big voices, and I'm curious if there's anybody that's really influenced you in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the founder of our organization, Mike Holcomb, who really took me in and was very patient and mentored me. I knew nothing about construction or anything. I just cared about sustainability, and he, you know, really took me in, helped mentoring me. He was a home energy professional assessor since 1980, one of the original Energy Star assessors, a home inspector, and then, you know, became one of the original Leap for Homes quality assurance directors when there was only like 5 way back in the day when I was still just graduating high school before I knew anything. And so he's been a great mentor, and, you know, I appreciate everything he's done for the movement. Even at times when, you know, he's someone who didn't really care about solar panels and all of what we call eco bling. all he really cared about was just looking at the details and helping people reduce their energy and make their buildings healthier, and kind of kept his head down and just focused on the day by day. And it was, just really inspiring to see that, because most people want immediate action. And so, or immediate results. And so it's always great to see someone just dive into the details and be patient and help you come along.
That's awesome. Well, thank you to Mike Holcomb, founder of GreenHome Institute. Thank you, Brett Little, current basically director of everything.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah,
that's not your official title, but do you want to? I'll put up some links, obviously, to GreenHome Institute's website and stuff. But for anybody listening, if they're looking to contact you for a project or for information or for webinars or certifications, where can they reach you? And if you have any other links you want to throw out there, now's the time.
Yeah. Brett.little@greenhomeinstitute.org, which is our website, which, GreenHome Institute is on YouTube, so you can subscribe and get updates on all sorts of great events and webinars that are completely free, worth CEUs. So we'd love to see you out someday.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Brett.
All right. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.